Greetings, duelists, and welcome to another video. This is week number 8 of doing the weekly deck report. Uh, I'm still playing the Centur-ION deck. I did make a few notable changes compared to last week. Also, I want to give a little bit more in-depth explanations because we are currently in the third week into Phantom Nightmare format, which is very like detrimentally changing from what we had in the format prior, and that pretty much gave me the thing to adjust my strategy with a contingency plan. I'm going to go more in depth on why I'm still playing Centurion, as well as the notable changes that I have been making to the strategy, uh, and just what are my plans moving forward. But yeah, without further ado, let's begin. So the Centurion lineup is still the same, like uh, 3, 3, 1 Emeth. I'm still playing the 3 stand up, the 3 Emblema, the 1 Bonds, and 1 Phalanx. That did not change at all. The one addition that I did make is I put back terraforming, which essentially is the fourth copy of the stand up, which explaining this pretty much is despite you having awkward redundant hands with this, you still want to open as consistently as possible with your engine, especially if you're going to switch up your strategy to be playing a lot more non-engine, which I will cover very soon. But yeah, that's it for the Centurions. Uh, I'm still playing the Bystials. That did not change at all. So 3 Rebellion, 1 Magnemut. I added Boldrake now, and I'm still on 3 Druisworm. Or if I recall, I think the last list I showed had 2 Druisworm, so now it's 3. The 1 Regained and the 1 Etude of the Branded. So going into Boldrake, Voiceless Voice is very popular in my area, and that deck is very weak to Bystials. As long as that trend still happens, I'm still going to be playing Bystials in my deck because Bystials have a natural synergy with this archetype, as well as having a contingency plan to just play against Voiceless Voice. And I was correct. Like this past weekend was an OTS championship event, in Titan Games, which is the locals I usually go to, and over there were a fair amount of voiceless voice players that were doing fairly well in the top tables. I did face against one of them, which was on the first round, and I sadly lost that match. And in the second game of that match, I only saw one Bystial. In my I only saw one Bystial in my opening hand. It went into a grind game of 5 turns, and I did not see any other Bystial in during those 5 turns. I kept opening and drawing into more Centurion cards, which was redundant because I didn't need it engine. I needed more of my non-engine, and that's sadly how I lost that match. So moving forward, I think this lineup is not going to change. Post Legacy of Destruction, this engine is going to be a lot more powerful. It's going to have much more natural synergy with Centurion. So I might as well try to get used to this engine as much as possible because uh, depending on what happens with Snake Eye, with the engine, or at least with fire as a whole in the next upcoming weeks or months, uh, things could change from my perspective, but right now I'm aiming more towards voiceless voice than the fire decks because voiceless is very popular in my area. But at the same time, these cards are fine against the fire deck. I did make a video talking about that, so feel free to check it out. It was the last video I made before this one. But essentially, what I am trying to explain there is that Bystials are not the best hand traps, but they are really good as hand traps as well as extenders. And against certain matchups like Voiceless Voice, Branded, Labyrinth, Raid Raptors, which is a very scary deck for those who are unprepared for that one. Uh, like, these cards are just phenomenal. So now let's go to the last portion. Uh, 3 Crow, 3 Veiler, the 1 Nib. That's all being standard from the last list. Now for the new changes. I'm now playing Ghost Ogre. So explaining Ghost Ogre, this is another lighter dark hand trap that is just actually very decent this format. A good amount of fire decks are not respecting the sanctuary protection from Fire King Island, and they try to miss sequence their plays by going with the lineup of the Snake Eye portion first and then the Fire King portion, and that's when you heavily punish them by just popping Fire King Island. This also fairly strong against IP Masquerena, against Appaloosa, which is another big one. Against Voiceless Voice, you can pop either their spell or their trap card, which is also huge. Against like a few more of the roguish mashups, like for example, like the Raid Raptor deck, you can also hit their XYZ monster on the spot. Like hitting the Brave Strix before it resolves to become Arsenal Falcon with the Skip Force spell is really, really huge. This is just pretty much a blowout against that deck. And since they try to start their play with the Raider's Wing, which makes them untargetable, which means you cannot Veiler or Imperm, which I am playing Imperm now. You pretty much can use Ghost Ogre and just insulate their plays even under the protection of these other 6 hand traps. I'm only playing one. I want to play more copies of this, but at the same time, this is a hard once per turn hand trap, and this is not like the better hand trap against everything else in the format compared to like these other 9. So I just kept it at 1 alongside Nibiru. And the last 3 cards are talents. I think I won't stop playing talents in this deck. I think the talents is just a very phenomenal card, especially since we're in a heavy hand trap format. You probably noticed there are no Horus cards. I pretty much just swapped them for hand traps. So, firstly, I want to shout out Diego Rodriguez, testing partner from EJ Gaming, Battle 12. I did a bit of like deck testing, and I did a couple of matches with him playing the Snake Eye Fire King deck, and I just kept falling into the issue where the Horus cards do not interact well against his interruptions. Against every other deck in the format that is not fire based, the Horus cards are as fine. They pretty much do well, like in securing the grind game. However, if fire ever becomes more popular in my area, or end up facing more fire decks, I kind of want to play as much non-engine as possible, and I just stuck to this amount. There's no Ash Blossom and Drone Lockbird. Drone Lockbird is very mediocre in the main deck. Like, uh, I I I essentially lost 3 matches where draw would have been effective against them, but it ended up not being as effective. The other thing about to know is that the number one reason I'm not playing Ash Blossom is that against the fire deck, it gives them a fire monster for Hira, the Flame Charmer, which makes them go to Promethean Princess, which pretty much insulates their line to try to complete the Fire King setup or like the Fire Promethean setup, even under Ash Blossom. So despite how impactful Ash Blossom is against like certain decks and matchups, it's just kind of awkward this format against certain decks. Uh, I am risking myself to be more open towards branded. However, I feel like with the Crows, the Veilers, the Imperms, and the Bystials, I do have like enough cards to like deal with the branded matchup. If you make the count, is a 14 non-engine, which pushes to 19 if you count the Bystials against like certain matchups, which I feel is like a fair amount. But that's it for the main deck at the moment. I'm going to talk about the side deck now, as well as like the extra deck, and then I'll talk about my plans moving forward with the strategy. So extra deck, Artemis, SP, Lina, Dark. Since I'm no longer playing the Horuses, I dropped my rank 8 count to Justin Girsu. I'm playing Sky Crisis, Chaos Heartstring, Chaos Angel, Dispater. I'm testing out Shenyang, Baron. We're still playing Crimson Calamity. I feel like as long as Calamity is in the format, that's the only monster you should be using with Crimson Dragon. Crimson Dragon now has a second purpose because if I summon any other Synchro 10, I can turn the Crimson Dragon into Dispater. And the last two are Legatia. Legatia. Um, so, other explanations, I guess I can explain the Light Charmer. Voiceless Voice is very popular, like I mentioned beforehand. So that makes it so I have a way of just like keep extending and pushing through my opponent's board, or just try to capitalize on like what my opponent has with Lina. The other thing is a Fed Veiler is also seeing a lot of play. So Lina being there to just secure and take Fed Veilers is also strong. In the future, I want to try out Selene Access Code since we do run 6 spellcasters in the main deck and 3 in the side deck, and we also have like Artemis as like one other spellcaster. So I feel like it could work out as an idea, like just giving ourselves another way to like try to contest against our opponent's board and ultimately just like OTK them. There is one other explanation behind the Bestial Dispatter here, because in testing this card has been very mediocre. It's not that it's not good, it's mainly that its purpose and intention is not prioritized over Chaos Angel or Baron the Floor. However, there is one cool game plan that I am doing with this card, and it's in the side deck. And I think I'm going to go into that. So for side deck, we're still in 3 draw. We are still in 3 cosmics. I'm still playing Iron Thunder. This might become Solemn Judgment again, or I might just pair this alongside Solemn Judgment. The number one reason is Iron Thunder can pop your own spell and traps, or your own cards in the cards column where the cards are negated, and it's very easy to fill up all your spell and trap zones in the Centur-ION strategy meaning that you have to like be careful and not mismanage where your zones are if your opponent tries to play into this. Uh, I've had like two opponents that outright just lost to this card, and they said in the future that they're going to be like more cognizant of the existence of this in my side deck, meaning that they're going to play into the zones where this card is very vulnerable. That being said, this is still a very very phenomenal card. I still think this is like one of the better cards in Phantom Nightmare. It's one of my favorite cards from that set. And moving forward, I'd say this is still not an incorrect choice. You just have to be careful playing with this card. So we're still on the Duster, but we're no longer on Change of Heart or like Tactics. Now we're playing Monster Reborn, and we're playing Called by the Grave. So, Called by the Grave was in the main deck. It was one of our defensive cards. But I just found in testing that this card is very, very mediocre if you don't go first. Uh, it's true that this card is very strong against like the Fire King deck or every deck that just has Promethean Princess in your side, in like your graveyard. But I feel like if you let your opponent resolve all their plays, like after your like 19 non-engine, you're just going to struggle against them no matter what you top deck or if you have this as your like as a going second card. So I just felt like just having it as a catalyst for hand traps or as a defensive card in specific matchups just was a little bit more ideal than just having it in the main deck. The same thing goes for Monster Reborn. I think Monster Reborn is a really good extender. It helps against certain matchups as well. Um, However, I don't feel like this card is good enough in the main deck, especially since we're in a format where you just want to play as many hand traps as possible. And now I'm going to talk about the last card in my side deck, and it's one of the reasons I put this batter back into my extra deck, and that card is Dimension Shifter. So I've played against enough Shifter decks with the Centur-ION deck, and I've noticed that every single game I lose to Shifter, I lose because of Cosmic Cyclone, and not just Shifter itself. Just having Cosmic resolve on like my Centurion monsters in the spell and trap zone, or on like field spell, and other things like that, just makes it so. Uh, I was almost bound to lose no matter if they had Shifter or not. Uh, if I would play this better in my deck, I can pretty much like have a secure strategy that just keeps my engine in check while just locking my opponent on the shifter. Uh, so the way I use Dimension Shifter specifically is against half boards and not starting plays. Like if you hold the shifter for a position where your opponent is already committed into half of their engine, you pretty much put them on a spot where either they have to finish their play awkwardly into this card, or they just like pass turn, and essentially if you can play through half their like their commitment with your strategy and like stabilize a good grind game, you should be able to win that game, like regardless. Uh, Against the matchup that I put this against, I do not play this against Voiceless Voice. I think the Voiceless Voice matchup is already fine. Like I feel like this is just ideal against the super heavy combo decks like the Snake Eye Fire King deck or like the pure Snake Eye deck. Just to give an example, this doesn't have to be specifically for those matchups. This also can be done against other matchups, like for example Raid Raptor, Rika Plants, which I did face this weekend. Uh, like some of the more aggressive decks of the format. Did it work out? I never drew it in my opening hand. I always drew it like as a seventh, eighth, or ninth card. So it's very hard to gauge the impact behind this card if I don't open it. which is pretty much sad to see as a prospect. But in the future, um, when this card becomes main deck worthy in Centur-ION, and yes, I did say that this card will become main deck worthy in Centur-ION in the future. I will make a separate video talking about that. Uh, then it might uh, be able to secure more games than just like a game two or three. Um, so that has been my weekly deck report. Throughout this week, I tested with Diego Rodriguez again, a fellow EJ team partner. That's where I got my concession plans for the main deck. And this weekend, I played the OTS Championship. Sadly, I lost to Voiceless Voice, as I explained earlier. It was my first actual voice loss, like in a major tournament, or at least in a tournament in a while. Uh, I also lost to Rika Plants. Game three, I trolled, crowed, and impermed him, and the hand was so insane that he just kept comboing off, and had enough for it to end on like enough disruption against like my engine, which it yeah. Shout outs to Juan Rocky Boy. I know he's a regular in the channel. He watches like my videos, and he was the one who defeated me with the Rika deck. So, just to you. Um, Overall, I'm not disappointed. I'm still going to keep playing Centur-ION. Um, the main reason for that is like is one of the decks I'm most comfortable with. It's a deck that's receiving more support in Legacy of Destruction. It's a deck that can play a good amount of non-engine, which is something that you need if you're not playing the fire deck. And with Voiceless Voice being very popular, I wanted to just play a deck that can play like the Bystial cards, the most ideal, and feel like this is one of those strategies. But yeah, that's it from me. Uh, Changes that I will make in the future. There is another engine I want to try out with the Centurion cards, uh, and it might make a difference. But yeah, I'll let you know what happens next week. I hope you found this video informative and to your liking and understanding. This has been week report number 8. Keep practicing and keep dueling.